Hand-drawn animation is kind of a ridiculous concept, difficult to even comprehend just how difficult it actually is to perform. A single drawing is a work of art. It's beautiful on its own. But for animation, you make another drawing after that, then another drawing after that, and then you make around 200 more to get across the illusion that these drawings are moving. It's something I talk about a lot in this channel, that the average person has absolutely no idea of just how draining and time-consuming hand-drawn animation is as a process. It's a skill that takes a lifetime to master, and that is of course only considering it as a work of art, as a skill. If you're thinking about it as a career path, then commercial animation is its own different thing, involving businesses and the division of labor that will in itself take another lifetime to master. Just making good-looking art is not enough. You have to learn how your art would interact with all of the other pipelines. Your work now dynamically interacts with everything else in this humongous system. And that ends up being more important than even making good art. That might sound like a negative thing, but it's actually a positive. In an ideal world, My Hero Academia every season would have 10 years of production schedule and every single cut would be animated by Yutaka Nakamura. Fortunately, we don't live in that world. So Yutapon just animates the highlights and a bunch of other artists, managers, and producers handle the other stuff that he necessarily doesn't need to handle. At the very least, for one project of one episode, you need to make the storyboards, which is usually done by the episode director or another storyboard artist. You need a layout animator to create movement out of those storyboards. You need animation directors to actually make the drawings. You need key animators to combine the drawings and the movement, and then you get in-between animators or dogamen who finally make the drawings that we get to see, which is then colored, composited onto a background painting, everything pretty much organized by the episode director. You get the idea. Of this, the most creative steps, however, are in the storyboards and the key animation. The storyboard is the birth of the idea, and you might argue that layout is just as important because that's the birth of the movement. But in the Japanese anime industry, it's not uncommon for the key animator to be the one who's doing the layout. In Western animation, the storyboard is the layout, which is a whole different can of worms that I don't want to get into for this video. But the point is, in the Japanese anime industry, the key animator has a large amount of freedom on how they want to design the animation of their scene. But of course, key animation is also the most challenging step of animation. And unlike storyboards, where it's not uncommon that all the storyboards of an episode is done by one artist, all the drawings of an episode is usually never made by one person. And even in one person's cut, they are not usually the only person involved. This may be Koki Fujimoto's animation, but these drawings are not that of Koki Fujimoto. These are the drawings of Sota Yamazaki, the animation director. But it was also drawn by Koki Fujimoto to make the Genga. So ultimately, what we get to see, this, whose drawing is this? Is that the animation directors? Is that the key animators? Or is that the second key animators? It's the Doga artists' drawings, none of those people. I hope we get the idea of just how organized while also being inorganized the anime industry is, and just how many people are needed for even a single cut of animation. What if it was done by one person? Episode 6 of Yaiba was animated entirely from start to finish by one artist, Takeshi Maenami. There is no other animator credited here. And it is an absolute masterpiece. Though, why would you do this? Why would you throw away the advantages provided by teamwork? When there are so many people involved with every single aspect of a production, there are ideas lost or there are disagreements. The final product is never an unadulterated vision of one person. And again, that's not a negative thing. It's one of the reasons so many Sakuga nerds such as myself are drawn to the anime industry, where it might sound like no one has creative freedom because none of their pure ideas are making it. But that's because everyone has creative freedom and everybody's ideas are kind of making it. But sometimes that cohesion that comes with the uniformity of one person's vision is really appealing to watch. This is particularly ideal for short form content like openings, endings, PVs, etc. Mainly for two reasons. Number one is just that, yes, one person's unadulterated vision actually works when the content itself is pretty short. But number two, and more importantly, it is short. It's much easier for one person to do everything for one project if said project is only 1 minute 30 seconds long. Another thing is that from a production point of view, openings, endings, etc. exist in sort of like this limbo where it is a separate project, but it's also part of the show. You can have people who are part of the show work on the opening, or you can hire a completely different team who will never appear on the show itself to work on the opening. Either way, it exists in this paradox where it's part of the project while also, being its own unique project. So if this separate project is being handled entirely by one person, you can see how that could be helpful. It's beneficial for the production company, but also really beneficial for the artists, because these are unique opportunities where they get to truly express themselves. There are artists who've constructed their entire brand around this. One of the first works that Shingo Yamashita ever did was direct a Shippuden ED where he animated everything. He did the same for Tetsuwan Birdie Decode. This ED literally has the credit, everything Shingo Yamashita. So that's not just every single drawing you see, but also the compositing, the paint, the background art. These days, Yamashita obviously still directs openings, but he no longer handles the key animation aspect alone. He instead focuses on handling the creative aspect alone, the storyboards and direction, and also his own specialities being the compositing. Other artists with the same niche include Norimitsu Suzuki, who storyboards, directs, and animates endings all on his own. Ryoma Ebata does the same things for both endings and openings. Recently, Chainsaw Man is a pretty good example. I say recently, but Chainsaw Man was 3 years ago. But yeah, Chainsaw Man had 5 endings, if I'm not mistaken, where all the creative aspects, being the storyboards, direction, key animation, everything was handled by one person. Lastly, of course, I have to give a shout out to Yasuhiro Eirei's Soul Eater opening, one of my favorite openings of all time. Very recently, he also did the ED of Mono, which was equally a masterpiece. All the benefits and demerits of having one person handle everything for short form content generally also carries over to long form content. Of course, one person handling everything would be massively beneficial to the project as a whole, because you're saving a lot of resources in terms of manpower that can be used for the upcoming episodes. But productions that could really use that leeway can't, because you need to have a decent schedule in the first place to allow for one person to do everything. These one person projects, I wouldn't be surprised if they easily went up to 6 months of production time, maybe even more. It's just that since these 6 months are not directly interacting with the production of the other episodes, being done by one person and all, that's why it actually helps the production. But if that time period is not available for that single artist in the first place, it's not even possible. It's truly a rich get richer system in the anime industry. And that's why even though some of these episodes end up existing for the reason of saving resources, they also end up looking great. Because from a production point, if one person is handling everything for an episode, you'd want that one person to be a really good artist. And from the artist's perspective, this is a fantastic opportunity for them. They have all the time in the world to create something that is completely born out of their vision. And that is why some of these episodes also end up being really ambitious, like even above average compared to the regular episode. And that sounds insane that a solo animator episode might end up looking better and being more ambitious than an episode with 50 artists, but that's just how the industry works. And the Yaiba episode falls firmly into this category. Yes, we are back on topic. Just watching this episode is enough to make anyone realize that this is not an episode that's, realistically trying to save resources via the solo key animation plan. It is incredibly well animated and highly ambitious. This has been done more like a challenge, not because the project needs this, but because Takeshi Maenami wants to fucking do this. The goal here was to make history. And make history they did. Solo key animation sounds cool, right? Like some of you watching probably didn't even know that solo key animation was a thing. That is the idea here though. That's what Maenami wants you to feel here. He's doing this because he fucking can. He's just that good an artist and he got the platform to prove it, so he did. Now, what exactly do I mean by looking behind the scenes and looking at the staff list? I can explain by comparing this solo key animation episode to a couple of other projects. The first project I'm going to share with you is something that viewers of this channel are thoroughly familiar with because I use it as an example for smart production in every single opportunity that I get. It's Mob Psycho Season 1 Episode 4. This is also a solo animation work, this time by animator Sadamoru Yuki. This is a classic case of an episode that saves resources. The amount of movement in this episode is just above average by, anime standards, which means it's below average by Mob Psycho 100 standards. The direction is great, the drawings are great, and there are quite a few well-animated cuts. But in terms of visual appeal, it definitely falls behind when compared to the episode that came before it and also the episode that comes after it. Episode 3 had Gosei Oda as the animation director, which is quite the commanding name in the anime industry, and thus brought in a bunch of extremely talented action animators on this episode. Episode 5 was somehow even bigger than episode 3. This time Kenichi Fujiwasa, another humongous name, not just as the animation director though, he's also storyboarding and directing. And this episode was one of the highest peaks of Mob Psycho as a whole, with Norio Matsumoto making an appearance. Episode 4 solo animated by Maruyuki, obviously can't hold the candle to these two in terms of ambition, and yet it's the episode that I've mentioned more times than the other two episodes on this channel across the span of the 100 videos that I've made. This is video number 100, by the way. You can congratulate me in the comment section. Solely because it's the most unconventional episode and the most fun to learn about because it's, animated by one person. Since the episode can't have constant movement, Maruyuki instead focused on making extremely cool looking drawings. These are some of the best still frames in the whole project. And even when there is limited animation, the direction executes in a way that it works with a comedic tone. Yes, it's limited. Yes, it's not the best episode of Mob Psycho, but it still stands on its own 2 feet as an incredibly unique and still compelling work of art. How does Yaiba's episode 6 compare to this? Yaiba episode 6 is the best episode in Yaiba. From start to finish, almost every single cut has movement. And it's not just that it continuously moves, it moves really well, which is expected because it's a highlight Sakuga animator animating every single cut. But if you look behind the scenes, the differences become even more apparent. If you look at the credits, both Maruyuki and Maenami were also the solo animation directors in addition to being solo key animators. Now yes, Yoshimichi Kameda is credited as chief animation director for the Yaiba episode, but that feels more like an honorary title than anything. I don't think Kameda had to make any corrections on Maenami's drawings. Maruyuki, however, was not able to make all the Genga for the episode. Even with somewhat limited movement, this episode still needed 18 second key animators to complete the Genga. Because again, this episode is just trying to save resources, and using quite a few second key animators is not necessarily that bad. Of course, if it balloons to like a Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 level of 90 or 100 second key animators, that's a different thing. But 18 second key animators is like below average. It saved up on the core creative stuff. One episode director, one storyboard artist, one animation director, and one key animator. The last two being the same person, Maruyuki. But Yaiba episode 6 did not even need second key animators. The Genga for every single drawing that you see on screen was entirely done by Takeshi Maenami. I mean, if he wanted to, could he have taken help from a few second key animators? Obviously, but he doesn't want to. That wouldn't be his holistic vision at that point. Some of his highlight drawings or his more sketchier idiosyncratic drawings might get affected in the second key animation pipeline. The difference between these two episodes can be further explored when looking at the directors. The Mob Psycho episode was directed by Tomoaki Ota, but the storyboards were done by Yuzuru Tachigawa, who is the series director of the show. The reason he did not direct it himself is, why would he? This is not a highlight episode, so he doesn't need to spend months directing it. He can just make the storyboards and then move on to supervising the other episodes that are more important. For Yaiba episode 6, this is the highlight episode. So they brought in Yuji Tokuno, a highlight action director. You and I know him from Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 episode 20, which was a top 5 episode for the show, but he was a really competent action director way before that. From this comparison, we can conclude that in the anime industry, something even as niche as a solo animated episode is a spectrum. On one end, we have Mob Psycho episode 4, which saves up as many resources as possible while still looking quite good. Of course, it looks good because, as I mentioned before, solo key animation episodes won't even be possible without a good schedule, and a good schedule will mean good animation. But on the other end, we have Yaiba episode 6, which is the most ambitious, the best looking episode of the show that just happens to be animated by a single artist. And in this solo key animation spectrum, you'll see a bunch of episodes with varying level of ambition that save up varying level of resources. Ultimately though, Yaiba episode 6 being as good as it is might stand out as the anomaly, but it's actually Mob Psycho episode 4 that's more of an anomaly. One person animating everything was more common way back in the 1900s, but in the 2010s, you generally won't see an ambitious project like Mob Psycho 100 being so intricately well planned that it designs a solo key animation episode that ends up saving the project. It is actually more common to find solo key animation episodes that are ambitious. Takeshi Maenami is an insane individual for pulling this off, no matter what kind of schedule he had, but the anime industry is filled with insane individuals, fueled by an incomprehensible amount of passion. Takashi Kojima was the solo animation director and solo animator for the highlight episode of Devilman Crybaby. Yes, he required assistance from second key animators, but he one-ups Maenami by directing the episode. The only thing left to another person in the creative process is the storyboards, which was done by Masaki Iwasa. Just like Your Lie in April episode 5, another solo animation project by Takashi Kojima, where once again he did everything except the storyboards. Because Kojima, I'm guessing, does not like storyboards that much, which is kind of a shame because the one time he did do storyboards, it ended up being one of my favorite openings of all time. But can you one-up this? What is beyond a person who is doing all the animation, all the corrections, and directing the episode? How about the storyboard, the script, and the character design, and some of the in-betweening as well? I've narrowed it down quite a bit because even among the clearly insane individuals in the anime industry, there is only one Kiyotaka Oshiyama. You might know him as the director of my favorite movie of all time, Look Back, where he also happened to do half the animation for the entire movie. He's also solo directed and animated endings and all that. But when it comes to episodes, I'm talking about episode 5 of Space Dandy Season 2. Once again, it's not fully completed by him in the sense that he required second key animators to help, but these are clearly not your average second key animators. They are highlight animators themselves who Oshiyama trusts to give him beautiful lines that he can work with. Because yes, he's working with them afterwards as well, not just processing as the director, but also doing the in-betweening himself to a great degree. The final lines that we get to see, once again I have to mention this, are the in-between lines, the doga lines. So it doesn't matter even if you are solo key animating an entire episode, the lines that the viewer gets to see would still be a traced copy of those drawings. Unless of course you are Kiyotaka Oshiyama and you do literally everything. This video is not about the Space Dandy episode though, so I'm gonna stop the Oshiyama glaze. But the point is that we have another solo key animation episode that rivals this in the first place. Space Dandy Season 2 Episode 5 is one of the best animated episodes of the best animated project of all time. And I firmly believe that nothing would ever come close, but now there's a rival being Takeshi Maenami's Yaiba Episode 6. I'm just gonna move on to the scene-by-scene breakdown to show you firsthand on what makes this such an incredible episode. So one thing director Yuji Tokuno specifically pointed out for this episode is how good the art direction is. There are 3 qualities that good art direction should have. Number 1, the creation and the processing should be done in a way that it matches the foreground characters. This can mean making the backgrounds look very similar to the foregrounds, like as you can see in City the animation for example, or just make it super realistic and process it in a way such that the foreground characters still fit with the backgrounds. This is the approach usually seen in Ufotable shows and even Yaiba. The foreground characters look very cartoonish, but the background is hyper-realistic. The second quality is good mixing. If the background movement is really chaotic, the art direction must match it. For example, in this cut, if the art direction is isolated, it kind of makes no sense. It's warped and distorted in a way that wouldn't really look good on its own, but it's done in this way because it perfectly matches the movement of the characters. And the third important quality for good art direction is just being a good fucking painting. This singular frame, while not being mind-blowing in terms of raw painting quality, still fits that number 2 quality really well. There's no foreground to match with over here, but it's still really technically impressive the way the buildings are warping towards the side. The background painting is done in a 4-point perspective to get the scale of the city across. That looks really cool. There are also quite a few instances in this episode where the background painting is just of a much higher level of quality than the rest of Yaiba, which is already at a pretty high base quality, further showing that this is the highlight episode. This is the first cut with Takeshi Maenami's input. It's just classic Kannada style character acting. Look at how elongated and bouncy this boy is. This cut, yes, we can use this to understand the scale of solo key animation. Yes, Maenami has to animate these 2 characters bouncing around. But it doesn't end there. Drawing everything on screen means drawing every element of the cell layer. In this case, everything outside of the background, which means all these 2D characters are in the cell layer. Maenami is also drawing the characters of the main cast that are not moving. The crowd over here, the crowd over here, these 2 ladies over here. If there's a cut which is just a still background painting but has smoke animation, yep, that's done by Maenami. If there are other still images of just crowds, again, all of these characters are still drawn by Maenami. This is another really cool cut. I love the compositing over here. It's made to look like a phone screen. If you look closely, you can actually see the individual pixels. There's the RGB chromatic aberration and a wavy effect added by the compositing team. But the thing is, a real phone screen does not really look like this. Some of you are watching this on phone screens and you don't see RGB chromatic aberration all around me. But if you were recording a screen, then it would look like this. And that's kind of the idea here. We are not directly looking at this phone screen. This phone screen is being recorded by a camera, an imaginary camera that does not exist because all of this is animation. But that's the idea Yuji Tokuno is trying to get across, which is kind of funny. Another fantastic layout over here. This time it's a 5-point perspective. The introduction of the bat is done really well. Start with a shot of goofy Yaiba being goofy and childish. For a couple of frames, the screen is completely black, kind of building suspense, but that's just the bat's wing covering the imaginary camera. All 3 characters sense the bat approaching, but Maenami animates their body language completely differently. First is Tiger over here, who's just a fucking tiger, so he just moves a little bit. He's off screen, but I'm guessing he's reacting to the bat, which is why he moves. The girl, whose name I forgot, she does sense him and then she turns around. She's a little bit confused, does not know what's happening yet, but Musashi can immediately tell that this is a strong foe, and so his reaction is the most intense. A powerful cut with great sense of speed over there. Maenami is drawing the bat as basically a blob of smears with black blob of smears still surrounding him, which are the bats. Cool bit of background animation as he takes the bat up there, and then classic Kannada style animation. He's building anticipation with the bat here. He's gonna go thump on top of the building, and Look at how many frames he uses as anticipation. Boom. And then he pulls back the camera to bring this really cool shot. The menacing bat in the distance with a third-person camera perspective of Yaiba. The drawing of Yaiba is also really cool. Look at the shading work. Kanada poses and timing is already exaggerated. Maenami exaggerates it further. When Musashi comes into the frame, you already see white action lines, which Maenami loves to abuse. He lands, again, crisscross lines on the screen. One of his feet is in the air. Look at the amount of impact that there is on just Musashi planting his feet, which is once again accompanied by straight white lines. Maenami has settle animation for every single pose. So once Musashi plants his foot, there's settle animation for his body. He's planted his foot, but then his body settles. That's not enough. After his body fully settles and goes still, his facial hair and clothes, they settle separately. So first he lands into the frame, he plants his foot, his body settles, and then his facial hair settles. Just constantly abusing anticipation. Once again, Yaiba getting into stance is really just two poses, but the snappy Kannada timing makes it so satisfying to watch. This pencil shading-esque dark shadow behind the bat is also really cool. It's used continuously throughout this episode. Look at the sheer quality of drawings. Again, all the Genga and the corrections done by Maenami. That is just an insane pose right there. That is supposed to be a really tiny stick. Just look at this. That's supposed to be the length of the stick. Let's go individually between the poses here. So here it's this close. You can see like his head is covering half of the screen. This is literally the next frame. That's how much he's jumping between the frames. No smears in between, not even his usual action lines. Brings his arm up and then again, significant amount of build up before putting the stick down. And then the stick finally comes down with massive amount of smears. Let's look at that in motion again. This is the first pose. This is the second pose, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is what Kannada style animation is like. You go from pose to pose with lots of build up and release in between. Before going to the next pose, this is another build up. There are individual drawings in between, but it's the same pose. Okay, so 8 frames of build up, and then the sword comes up. I'm saying sword, but it's really just a stick. 35, 36, 37. This is the longest hold ever. 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47. 46 frames of build up for this one action, which is why it looks so powerful. The payoff for all that build up is such a cool looking pose, so it's worth it. I'm gonna look at that in motion again. Oh, look at that. It's so snappy. It's so cool to watch. Another phenomenal cut over here, this time using ease in. The camera is pulling back. The camera is pulling back so that there's distance between the camera and the bat. Because if there's no distance between the camera and the bat, it would be difficult to convey the sense of speed. So this is a decent amount of gap that the bat closes in just one frame. The shockwave of the bat pushing against his foothold breaks the platform behind him and it pushes the camera further back, and the bat closes that distance again within an instant. Look at how snappy and impactful all of this is. Again, he's switching the poses so instantaneously, turns him into a Tasmanian devil in one of those frames. Very closed poses over here. Another thing that Kannada style animators use a lot. Closed poses followed up by open poses. So this is a very closed pose. His knees are as bent as possible over here. This sort of pseudo transition with this lightning to show Yaiba's eyes is also really cool. That's a Yuji Tokuno classic right there. Again, so many frames here that make no sense in isolation. Just look at this. What is this supposed to be? It makes no sense. But even with such a low number of frame count, he gets the meaning of the movement across so seamlessly. Yes, if you use lower frames, you have lesser of a workload because you don't have to draw as much, but using higher frames is an advantage. You can give more information to the viewer using more frames. Someone who has absolutely no idea how animation works, they could watch this and they could understand exactly what's happening. The illusion is just that powerful here. How does Maenami understand that going from this frame to whatever the fuck this is to literally a C-shaped smear and then turning the bat into the meta logo and then back into somewhat on model? How does Maenami know that that would give the illusion that the bat is moving in a crisscross pattern? That's talent. That's just experience at play. Hundreds of thousands of hours of learning and practice. That's how he knows how to use these frames. Look at how much power he's giving to these sequences that really don't need powers. What is this? That's his vulture friend grabbing onto him. It feels so powerful because of the snappy timing. Snappy timing, of course, because the build-up is immense over here and the release is accompanied by impact frames. And this is just tying a knot. But because it has impact frames and the anticipation before the pull is so strong, it looks so goddamn powerful. This is one of the highlight cuts of the entire episodes. He knows exactly how many drawings to use at all times. He has such powerful control over the pace of the animation. Fantastic compositing and 3D work here as well, by the way. For us, the sequence makes sense. They're not simply flying through an empty space, but for Maenami, they are. While he's creating the layout, this background space does not exist. He's literally drawing these characters on a blank canvas. For him to keep track of these two characters moving through a blank space, which is not really blank, there's supposed to be a building in the background, is, again, genius work. Smeared Yaiba over here, Bat over here, literally a spark. Both characters are missing. And they have switched positions. That's it. That's one clash. And he just keeps doing that over and over again. It is understood that all these smears are individual thrusts that the bat is doing really fast, and all these horizontal light slashes is Yaiba blocking those slashes. It's really cool how our brain can fill in those gaps. The camera is constantly moving, rotating slowly across the characters, but the characters themselves are moving so much that right now, Yaiba is extremely close to the camera. You can see his spiky head over here. But in the next frame, it's the bat. And his face slowly rotates in front of the camera. It is so good. This cut is so incredible. Again, man, look at this artwork. Look at this perspective over here. So gorgeous. This cut is once again really cool, where he kicks Yaiba. Amazing illustrations. Literally this pose, what the fuck? Goes away, classic fucking Canada's pose. Bent legs, as I said before, a very closed position, but with open hands. So he's not just going to kick Yaiba here, he has to make a full rotation first to increase the power of his kick. And yeah, again, turns into the Tasmanian devil. What is this? A spinning genie? Literally a bunch of blobs of smears, and then appears on model again before the kick. And the kick has massive amount of anticipation again. So many frames of build up. Kick connects, and before Yaiba is thrown away, there's a preparatory pose, this one, to just increase the impact of the release. Again, the compositing is incredible over here. It looks like a fallen angel, right? Yaiba has wings behind him and the god rays as well. It looks beautiful. Another incredibly cool layout here. They fly underneath the sign. The sign is animated by Maenami again. This is background animation. Liberal usage of camera shake over there as well. The camera would shake violently if a large vulture flew over it at high speeds, which is what's happening over here. I love the way he's animating the tiger as well. It's so fucking bouncy. The chase sequence is again incredible. Thorough use of background animation. Look at how he's pushing these characters forwards. Here the vulture goes a little bit back. It's as if it's tugging its chin behind and then pushes forward. It's propelling itself forward. It does that once again here. It bends its neck, and then it straightens his neck. It shoots itself forward. And then when Bat appears, he's doing the same thing. He appears, he's tugging his legs, he shrinks his whole body here, and then he propels himself forward. None of this is real. He just has to make it look real, which is so difficult. I'm having a hard time explaining all of it, so animating is a completely different thing. So voluminous. Look at the three-dimensionality here. Such a cool drawing. And of course, he has to add Canada light flares on top of the blade. And this is some of Maenami's best artwork over here. I particularly love the dyed outlines on top of the characters. It's done in a very unique way as well. It's an extra bit of protruding line on top of their face. It's not just breaks in the line art in the way that Takuya Ninuma, for example, would do it. This is light on top of their outline. And again, he's making such a simple face, so voluminous. Not many lines to define the face over here. It's less than 10 lines used to define this head. And it looks so voluminous. Here he goes completely lineless. Another intensely incredible layout, 5-point perspective. I guess this is just what happens to directors if they work with Shota Kushizono. First Arifumi Imai and now Yuji Tokuno. And this is what I was talking about. Remember how I told you that there are background paintings in this episode that are some of the best in the entire show? Here you go. This looks absolutely stunning. It's a wallpaper material, but it's also completely different in design to what we saw before. This entire time we had a distinct late evening art direction, and now it's nighttime. The color of the sky is different. The way the light interacts with the environment is different. The way the light interacts with the characters themselves is also completely different. All the warmth is now completely stripped away in place of cold colors. Most shows have a difficult time pulling this off in an entire season. Look at My Hero Academia, for example. Other shows like Apothecary Diaries, 6 different color profiles for every single specific time of day, and even additional color profiles for specific scenes, maybe even unique colors for specific cuts. But that's like overkill. The Apothecary Diaries direction is out of this world. Just like that, the bat is back, and the same shaded background behind him is so cool, so menacing. More Canada light flares. It's not really a Canada light flare though, is it? It has the same Canada light flare timing. So yeah, that's a Canada light flare. He could absolutely make these complete lines But no, he's made the spectacles segmented, like a line goes like this, a line on top there, a line on top there. He's flaunting his line art. Maenami is someone who has absolute confidence in his artwork. Look at our main characters in comparison, fully complete lines, even lines throughout. And then we switch back to bat, and then the same scrunchy, uneven lines throughout the face. The purple is the next color profile that we're going to have. Again, the art direction is going to completely transform. Look at that shit. God, this dude's animation is just so fun. It's just so fun. I love it so much. I'm skipping through a lot of this because it's just more of what I've said earlier. It's just what makes Maenami's animation amazing. Consistently incredible artwork, a constant abuse of anticipation, and really great dynamic poses. How much time do you think this one drawing took him? If I was to trace this and draw this, I mean, not trace it as in put paper on top of it and trace it, that would only take like an hour max, but it would still take like an hour for me to do that. If I was to look at this and copy it on a piece of paper with the same level of detail, I think it would take me like 5 hours. Yep, it would take me around 5 hours for sure. That's just one frame of his animation. Unbelievable guy. He's so good. I love how he intensifies his animation using the smears as well, and the more sketchier line art that he does with his drawings. The pipe here and the roof panels here are uniquely animated, as in it's background animated, as Yaiba jumps forwards and the bat comes down. Another really cool layout. This is also, it's a fisheye perspective as well. Not as exaggerated as the other shot that we saw before, but it's still a fisheye. This is another one of the highlight sequences. It could be considered the main action sequence. There are 3 main action sequences. One, we saw the aerial fight. This is the second one, and the third is going to be the final attack sequence. Just moving from one incredible pose. Look at these poses. Move to the next pose and then just constantly cycle between the poses with lots of anticipation. Look at the sheer amount of build up here, and the release is so powerful. But before that, look at the artwork on the bat over here. And individual drawings that move shouldn't look that good. When Yaiba lands, look at these poses. Look at that pose and the bent leg pose. These are poses that you will have to master. If you are interested in Kannada style animation, just draw bent knee poses. Just draw a lot of these poses. Learn to draw them from every single perspective and you're pretty much good. Just cycle between those poses with a lot of build up and release. Sometimes switch from open poses to closed poses and switch to open poses again. Congratulations, you are a Kannada style animator now. Let's look at bat as an example again. Legs are completely bent over here. Again, the classic Kannada leg bent pose. Fully elongates over here to come in contact with the floor. If I had to guess, the next pose would be again the pose that I just showed you. Look at that. It's a very predictable style of animation, which is what makes it so appealing. According to Maenami, this cut was quite a bit difficult to pen the layout for, because if you look at it closely, the characters are quite small over here. They are shorthand drawings and it's a panning shot. So it's quite a long shot. So how would you make the layout for something like this? You have your canvas, you zoom into one corner of the canvas, you determine point A and point B. That is the starting point of the characters and the ending point of the characters. You pan the movement accordingly, you zoom into individual areas of the canvas and you draw the 2 characters. But Maenami can't do that, because he draws his layouts on paper. That's right, all of his layout work in this episode is done in paper. When he does Genga, however, he does do it digitally, which makes sense because Genga is all about cleanup, and cleanup on paper is a fucking disaster. It's way easier to trace the lines digitally than to use a fucking eraser to clean your lines. But when you're making the layout, when you're literally creating the animation, it totally makes sense that Maenami would want to do that on paper, because drawing on paper, it hits different. Back to the scene. How do you draw small characters in a large canvas? Because this is a larger than usual canvas. As I said, it's panning from one corner to the other corner. You can't zoom in because it's a paper. So what do? You use a bigger paper. But when you use a bigger paper and you're drawing smaller characters, it's difficult to time the animation. If you're doing it digitally, you can create the panning motion while you animate. But when you're drawing on paper, you can't create this panning motion while you're animating. You have to imagine the panning motion and you have to time the motion of the characters accordingly. The only way to tell if your animation makes sense or not is to constantly flip the pages. So what Maenami uses here is sound. He's drawn certain onomatopoeia on his paper. This is done in specific distances. These are the locations where the characters are going to clash. Yoshimichi Kameda quoted Maenami's tweet and he basically said the same thing as well. When you start drawing actions, it's easy to get carried away and lose control, so I sometimes use a timesheet to set the number of sounds and the sense of timing with the rhythm, like sun, su, sun. That way it becomes easier to organize how to connect to the next pose or which movements to omit. God, these drawings are incredible. How many times have I said that in this episode? Many times, I'm guessing, but considering this is solo key animation and solo animation direction, I have to keep saying that. Just incredible doga work and line processing as well. I don't know if these crayon-esque outlines are drawn by Maenami. If it is, then the Doga men did an incredible job at maintaining those lines in the final product. If those were not done by Maenami, if he just did the base drawing, then again, the compositing team did a fantastic job at processing these lines. We see another instance of the crayon shadows on top of the bat, but every single instance so far has been black shadows. This time, for the first time, since it's sunlight directly hitting him, look at that. It's white crayons used for the shadow. Background painting, look at this artwork. It's beautiful. We had late evening, we had night, we had indoors with the purple vibe, and now we have morning. Art direction keeping up beautifully. This looks like it's out of Witch Studios' Attack on Titan. It's so beautiful. So what starts off as a layer of background painting just sliding off, when it does fall, Maenami has to hand animate that. So he's animating the top of a castle falling down. Even the way the marble is withering away has anticipation in it. Look at it. First, it's molding out of this pose, and then it withers away. And now we're getting the single best cut of this episode. The artwork is particularly excellent over here. Again, the sketchy lines. Yep, lots of crayon-esque artwork. Line processing is excellent over here. This is great, great Doga work. This is the key animator's lines processed on top of the base drawings. I'm assuming these sketchy lines might even be Yoshimichi Kamera's work. He loves adding sketchy lines on top of drawings as a means of correction. These sketchy doodles might just be Kamera's work as chief animation director of this episode, since actual correction of the drawings wise, he doesn't really need to do anything. The drawings are perfect. Of course, a Canada light flare over there. Insane pose. Full background animation. He propels himself forwards. The camera can't keep up. Camera moves past this goofy little faces over here. Constant use of smears everywhere. Camera finally catches up, goes past Yaiba. The bat is ready to thrust. Yaiba's reflection in his eye, and followed up by... Look at this drawing. It's one frame. It's one frame. Imagine making this drawing for one frame. I'm almost sad. This is the first time I'm seeing this drawing. I'm sure a lot of you people watching didn't really notice this drawing while watching because it lasts for one frame, man. Yes, in movement you can see it fly by, but I mean, it's difficult to appreciate the Mona Lisa when you see it like this. This is why more animators need to do what Shinnosuke Tanaka did with his One Piece sequence, where he literally pauses 2 drawings for 6 frames each and commands the viewer, look at this and appreciate this. More animators need to do that. Maenami, please do that next time, because yeah, if I didn't go frame by frame through this, I would have never seen this drawing. Classic Maenami impact frames over here. He loves to use wavy shapes. These look like decals that you would see on Need for Speed Most Wanted cars. Even with his impact frames, he's trying to propel it through space. Look at this. It's congested. It's like a harmonium that's compressed. The next impact frame is fully straightened out. He's propelling it forwards. Liberal use of camera shake again. And I love this drawing again. This is a drawing that has absolutely no camera input. You can just tell. This is a Maenami drawing. Maenami makes the jaw area much more rounded than usual, and he has a very distinct way of drawing the noses as well. It's really cute. This is another cut that is just so technically impressive. God, the weight of the movement is so good there. That's one cycle of the movement. Let's just look at one of the cycles of the movement frame by frame. So he raises the sword. His sleeves are trying to catch up because his arms are moving up. Here his arm is vertical, so the sleeves flow down his arms. And then he's moving the sword down. Again, really snappy. Look at the jump from there. No, he doesn't even use smears there. Doesn't even matter. Our brain will fill in the gap. It's coming down so fast that the sleeves are still suspended in air over here. But then they come back settling down. And every piece of his garments, they have individual settle animation. God, so impressive. It is so beautiful. But yeah, that was Yaiba episode 6. One of the best animated episodes of the year. And definitely the best solo key animation project of the year. I don't think anything's matching this. If you couldn't tell, I am trying to jinx myself. I want more solo key animation projects. I want more artists to flaunt their individual styles for the entirety of the duration of an episode. It's just so satisfying to watch. If you like this video, leave a like, maybe even become a channel member to support me. If you did not like this video, leave a dislike, leave a comment down there as well. I do read all the comments, and that's about it. Thanks for the views.